Welcome to Buy Corona webinar series, the Circle, Remote Patient Monitoring Using Novel Technology with Jeff Wyscarver. And as soon as my slides advance the way I'd like them to, we can go on to thanking our sponsors, not only for the support they give us for our programs, but also for the great technologies and oral appliances that they make available to us to help us do a great job for our patients. Also, I can't have one of these without sending a heartfelt thank you out to all the medical personnel and everyone else on the front lines that are keeping the world going while we've been at home flattening the curve. I'd like to send a thank you out to all those of you that have participated in our several webinars. I'm just listing them here. They're all archived on stdacademy.com for you to watch anytime you want if you miss them. And also, no worries. This is our last one for the time being because everyone's busy trying to get their offices up and running and focusing on that project. So we're all going to take a break, but we'll be back. Topics, dates, and times to be announced. I have about 3 or 4 great presenters that have great topics I'd like to present, and so we'll be announcing when they'll be happening. I'd also like to send a thank you out for all those of you that participated on our speakeasies on Wednesday afternoons. We're also taking a break for that for the same reason. You can see the many topics we've discussed here. Once again, these are all archived on stdacademy.com. And once again, topics, dates, and times will be announced as to when we're going to start these up again. A little bit of housekeeping, audio options. Click on your panel there. This is where you can fill in your questions. You can raise your hand or minimize your dashboard by clicking on the appropriate button. And for those of you that will be looking for CE certificates, you'll get them in about 2 to 3 days. If you want AGD, CE, you have to provide me your dental license number and your AGD number. There's a couple of points when you first register or when you exit the webinar that it asks for that information, so you have a couple of opportunities to provide that. So the Circle, I'm very excited about this today. I always get excited about new technologies and something that's going to help me do a better job for my patients. And I think this has great potential. We'll be talking about it from an evidence-based point of view, but we'll be talking about its potential in dental sleep medicine and for your patients in general. Remote patient monitoring is the part here that's really unique, and that it can be done over a number of nights. And Jeff will be giving us great detail on that. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jeff and ask him to start up his slides.
All right, John, does everything look okay to you guys?
Yes, we see your slide perfectly.
Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to actually talk about 2 items today. First is I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about the SARS-CoV-2 product that's coming to market in both Canada and the US, and I've prepared a couple of slides for that. And then I'm also going to spend a few minutes talking, the bulk of my time talking about the Circle and, more importantly, remote patient monitoring and what that means to us as dentists. So there's a variety of implications there, and I'm really excited about what that means for everybody. So let me just take care of this quick thing here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Okay, all right, so we're going to talk about, I'm going to spend just a couple minutes talking about the antibody test kit that's available now. And just before I get too far into that, I just want to be clear about something. At the moment, the kit that I'm talking about now, which measures the 2 antibodies associated with the SARS-CoV-2 virus, It is not available in Canada just quite yet. It's very soon it will be available. The kit is available in the United States. So so as I talk about this, and if you're interested in it, if your practice is in Canada, you're going to wait a week or some period of time, and we have a referral for you in that case. And if your practice is in the U.S., you can just contact me and get more information. And the kit is available. The kit is available now. Okay. All right. So testing categories. There's a couple of things to know about that. There's two broad categories. One is the nucleic acid test, kind of the swab test. And that measures the RNA in from what's primarily a mucus sample. So that's the kind of the swab test where they insert a swab into the nasal cavity is the most common way to get a sample. And then they test for the RNA of the virus. And if you have the RNA active in your mucus, then you're currently infected. So that's kind of, in the US at least, we received quite a bit of press on that test, and there was long lines of people waiting to get the long swab inserted into their nasal cavity, and then the test would take some number of weeks to get the results back. That's one type of test. The test that I'm talking about today is the antibody test, which is a completely different kind of test, and it's a blood test, and the blood sample's taken by a little lancet. It pricks the tip of your finger, and then I'll kind of show you how that blood sample is drawn, which is kind of one of the things that makes this kit available to be sent home for patients to use. And it measures, there's two antibodies, IgM and IgG antibodies, and depending on the presence or not of each of those or both, gives you an idea of where you are as far as the infection, or been infected or haven't been infected or currently infected. So it gives you a lot more information than the RNA test. However, it's a little bit more expensive, but as you'll see, I think it's worth the effort. So on the nasopharyngeal sample, it will tell you if you're currently infected. And it takes a day or two to be infected once you've been exposed. So people talk about false negative tests on the RNA test or the swab sample. And the false negative is usually you've been exposed, but you don't have enough RNA available to test positive yet. So it's not that the test is inaccurate, but it just isn't sensitive enough. If let's say we're exposed, yesterday and you're getting tested today. With regard to the antibody test, the blood test, the length of time is a little bit longer. It's about 3 days. So it takes about 3 days for an antibody to start showing up. So there's a longer latency there, and that's a big difference when you decide what's the most appropriate test. And what I tell people is, if you're symptomatic and you think you've been somewhere where you were exposed, then you should probably get the RNA test. If you are planning to go back to work, or perhaps what I'm proposing is that dental offices test their staff so they can get an idea. I'll talk about the strategies you can develop based on the outcome of the blood test. Okay, so this is what the blood test looks like. This kit can either be sent directly to a patient's home. You can order it online and give your mailing address, and it gets, Amazon will drop it off, and we'll go through kind of what you do at that point in time. But this is the kit. It's pretty straightforward. There's the sample. There's two things that make this, doable for the person at home without the intervention of a kind of a healthcare professional. One is the blood sample is much like a glucose sample, and two is the medium in which the blood sample is deposited dries the sample out, and that is the state in which the sample gets tested in the lab. So that, those are two pretty cool innovations. And actually, this process has been available for many years in the US, and that's why this test is so quickly available. And I will add that this test, is, it's kind of the gold standard. It's the gold standard. So when they compare other types of testing, they use this as the gold standard. So it's like the PSG, if you will, of sleep. So it is a very reliable, as reliable as can be, I'll say, as far as blood samples go. And I'll talk about some of the vulnerabilities and misuses of the data and some of the cautions you should take. So the process is, you stick your finger, it comes with 2 lancets. You only really need 1 unless somehow you miss. I'm not sure how it's possible. So you pick a finger, and you kind of, you can see from the picture there, once you push in, a needle quickly goes in and out, and then you start, a little drop of blood will be exposed, and then you kind of hover your finger over the sample receptacle, and you get 4 drops of blood in there. Sometimes you have to pinch your finger a little bit, and then you'll see that you're getting blood into the receptacle, the sample receptacle. And then what you do is you just snap that closed. You put a barcode that comes with your kit, and it also, what comes with the kit is a shipping bag, and you ship that off to the lab. That's pretty much all there is to it. In the kit comes, you get a barcode or a QR code, to be honest, and you just take the QR code, you type in the number of your kit and your name, and then you send your results in. And when your results are ready, you'll log in to your portal, and it will give you your results. It's pretty cool, pretty simple. Takes 2 days. Well, let me go back a page. When you do your sample, when your sample arrives at the lab, and I'll talk about the lab in a second, but when it arrives at the lab, they were able to give me the results the same day once it arrived. Now, I will tell you, I was the first person to get this test done in the current configuration. So it wasn't like they were really busy, but they can do up to 5,000 samples a day. So I don't know that the capacity will even approach what they can do. So once your sample's been analyzed by the lab, then you just log into your portal. You take your little QR code, and your results will come up, and I'll show you what the results look like. So this is what your results will look like. There's 2 antibodies associated with SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19. IgG and IgM, and I'll talk just a second about those 2. IgG comes into play when you're starting an infection and during an infection. So, but it takes 3 to 4 days before IgG shows up. So if you've been infected and you wait 2 days and then do this test, you'll probably come back negative. So one of the things I tell people to avoid the false negative is, if you think you've been exposed, then wait 4 days and then do the test. Isolate yourself for a few days, do the test, and then get the results, because one of the risks is that you've been exposed and you do your blood serum test too soon and your IgG hasn't built up yet. So you're actually infected, but you're not at a detectable level yet. So that's one of the cautions about doing this type of testing. Once you're in an infection and you're developing resistance, the IgM antibodies start showing up. And so if you are positive for IgG and positive for IgM, then you're coming out of an infection and you're starting to develop the resistance to the virus. And then if you're IgG negative, meaning the initial battle took place, and you're only IgM positive, then you've worked through the infection, and to the extent that we know that you're immune, you have that immunity. And let me elaborate on that a little bit. Immunity is not a given, okay? The SARS-CoV-2 looks very similar to the SARS-1. Okay, but it's not the same. There's some very important differences. But because it's very similar to SARS, we expect that you will have some amount of immunity for a period of time when you've been infected and you've worked through the infection. And that's an assumption, and it's being supported by the preliminary data, but it's not a confirmed fact yet. One of the things that people are skeptical about is that there's a very important difference between this SARS virus and previous SARS viruses, and that not everybody gets symptoms, but everybody who's been infected can be a carrier. So you may be a carrier, never get sick, and infect 10 other people, and 8 of those people may never get sick, but 2 will. And then there's, we know the news on what how lethal this is. And so it's a very dangerous combination. It's not as lethal as, let's say, Ebola, but Ebola, you have Ebola and you're immediately incapacitated. So you're not going to infect a lot of people, but your your prognosis is not good. The issue here is obviously that so many people are infected and don't know it, and they'll give it to some number of people, and those people will end up suffering some of the infection. So final slide here on this is kind of the interpretation chart and some of the cautions that I recommend. Is if you're negative on both, you're either really early on the infection or you have not been infected. So the first outcome and the last outcome, you'll see the test outcome is the same. You're negative on both. So you can't say, oh, I haven't been infected, and because there is the possibility that you're very early in the infection. So that's why I say, if you think you've been infected, wait 4 days and then do the test. If you're positive for IgM, the first antibody, but negative for IgG, then you're infected. And that's the same result that you would get if you got the RNA test or the swab test. Okay, so that's where that test tells you if you're infected, yes or no, is if you're positive on one and negative on IgG. If you're negative on IgM, meaning the initial phase is now on the initial battle is completed, and you have a number of IgG antibodies, that means that you're either in the early or late stages of the infection. And then if you're positive for both, you're late in the infection and medium in the battle. And then if you're negative on IgM and positive for IgG only, then you are what we hope will be somewhat immune to the infection because you've got the sufficient antibodies to fight it. So that's essentially what I wanted to talk about. So I think at this point, I had a poll question, John. Poll question 1. Okay, good. Thank you. So we'll wait a second. Okay. All right. So while you guys are doing that, I'm going to go to my next slide here. Okay. So now I'm going to shift gears, and we're going to talk about the Circle. Okay. So the Circle is a wearable.
Sorry to interrupt. Jeff. But we actually have immediate answers because the poll was put out, and 56% said yes, and 44% said no. Okay. So if that's some feedback that you want to speak on, based on your conversation that you had with the folks. Thank you very much.
I think that is interesting, and I always find that it's better to you learn more from the negatives than the positives. And I think on the negatives, if you wanted to maybe ask a question or voice a concern about the COVID-19 testing, I think in kind of summarizing that part of the discussion, the thought I had and why I am making this available in dentistry is dentists are in a unique position in healthcare. And I think there's a number of things that you as dentists are going to need to do in order to open your practice up. And you pretty much, there's been a lot of information disseminated about what you have to do to open up your office. And it's not a simple thing. And one of the challenges is there's a lot of unknowns based on this particular virus because so many people are unsymptomatic or don't have symptoms and may be infected. And my thought was, if a dentist wanted to open up their practice and have some type of assurance, some increased level of insurance, not a guarantee, but increased level of assurance that their office knows, the dentist knows the status of their office personnel with regards to the infection. You know, have you been infected, yes or no? And if you haven't been exposed, then there's a strategy for that outcome. If you're symptomatic or you come back infected, you can't be at work. You have to be at home. You have to be quarantined, and that's an obvious strategy. And that might seem obvious, but a lot of people aren't symptomatic. So if you get a positive test that you've been infected and you feel fine, this is a good catch. Okay, and that person needs to go home for a couple of weeks and let the infection take its course, even though they're not symptomatic. And then, you know, to me, in my mind, there's a number of people that have been infected and didn't really realize it because the symptoms were so nominal or they didn't experience them at all, and they are somewhat immune. And there's a strategy for that, for a person in that category. So as a dentist planning to reopen your office, these were the thoughts I had on why this test would be beneficial. So yeah, in closing up the comments on the poll, that's the thought I had. So okay, yeah, that's good. That's good info. Thanks, John.
Now, Jeff, for some reason your slides are not sharing on my computer. I don't know if other people can see
that.
So make sure that you got your slide share on.
All right, let's see here. I might have.
We see your lovely face, but we don't see your slides.
There we go. Yeah, I clicked the button there by mistake. I see.
Okay, we're good.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the wearables and remote patient monitoring for a couple minutes as well. And this is something that this is my major focus at the moment. And the term wearable is ubiquitous. The Fitbits and the Garmins and all that. And it's creeping into healthcare. And it presents some opportunities in dentistry. And I want to kind of share with you my thoughts on what those opportunities are and why I believe it's so important, especially to those dentists treating patients who've been diagnosed with sleep apnea and they're titrating their patients using oral appliance therapy. Moreover, a wearable, when properly implemented, engages your patient and it gets them involved at a level that's not really available unless they're participating at an intimate level at this data collection. And by that I mean, if you're wearing a sensor every day and you see the quality of your sleep and you're engaged as a patient, say, oh look, I did better last night, that's cool, and you want to do better and better and improve your sleep, this gets your patient engaged in therapy that they won't otherwise feel if you just do, say, an HST 2 months into their titration process. For the first 2 months, they're really not engaged unless they have some problems. Or if you're lucky and you've done a good job in treating them, they'll feel better and they're sleeping better. And obviously that's a good outcome as well. But at the end of the day, for most of the patient's experience, it's not dramatic and it occurs over time. And I will make an analogy now about comparing this to CPAP. And CPAP devices offer this, and in fact, I'll make a claim that doing remote patient monitoring is even better than the treatment or the information that providers get from CPAP. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. All CPAP devices generate kind of this compliance and utilization report and how effective the treatment was in managing the airway with regards to the flow. So obviously the CPAP's not going to have oximetry, but it certainly has a lot of information about flow, which is a really important signal. And that information is made available to the provider, but not the patient. Okay, so the provider knows exactly how you're doing, but the patient's not. So they're really not engaged. Okay, when the patient uses a Circle, they have available the data, the same data that you as a dentist is going to have. So you guys are sharing that information and you're using that to improve the patient's experience. And then the last thing that I'll say is that remote patient monitoring, there are medical codes, not dental codes, medical codes that allow healthcare professionals to bill for the services provided. And okay, that is a true statement, but what I will add to that is the only people that I'm aware of doing that are physician groups tracking patients that have COPD, asthma, congestive heart failure, and some of these chronic conditions. And sleep apnea is on the list of covered chronic conditions. Okay, so what's happening here is the CPAP devices, and ResMed and Philips both are now touting, hey, if you're a DME provider, you can get, some remote patient monitoring, and some of them are doing it in those cases. Though what I'm wanting to do is to get some dentists on board for the clinical purpose of tracking their patients, and then try the billing and see how it goes. I've had 2 billing companies look at this, and they both didn't see a reason why not. But as you guys know, who bill medical, the proof is in the pudding. You could say all day long it's feasible until you don't get a check, and then when you don't get a check, it's not feasible. So it's a concept that needs to be proved out. But I believe this is brand new. In fact, one of the codes that came out in January of this year. Okay. All right, so how do we do this? How do we get the data? So a lot of us know oximetry, a lot of us know HSTs. In fact, most of us do. And the critical component that's different between an HST or most of the oximeters out there is, would you as a dentist feel comfortable telling a patient wear this every day for 30 days? And I think in most cases, the answer is no. Maybe in some there is, but in most, no. And there might not even be, and in a lot of cases, it's heck no. I wouldn't want a patient to wear an Ox-T3 every day for 30 days. That's a lot of work, for example. That device is meant to get a lot of good, accurate information in 1 or 2 or 3 nights, and it does a fantastic job of that. That is not this. What we're wanting to do is collect a lot of data over a period of time. So it's the period of time that we're measuring, not the accuracy of 1 night. And so how this works is it's an oximeter that's a ring. You can see it's why it's been called the Circul, CIRCUL. I was against that name, just so you know. But it wasn't my decision to make, but so be it. It's a great device, love the device, but it's a ring, that's it. And the ring has built into it, and I'm kind of a nerd on technology, so it has built into it a battery, an oximeter, there's a heart rate sensor, a Bluetooth transmitter, and memory. All that in a piece of jewelry. So they've really mastered and miniaturized this. And there's an app on the phone, and that's it. So you start the test, and I'll talk about the different tests in a second. You start the test, and then you put your phone away or whatever. It doesn't transmit until the morning or after the test is done. It saves the data on the Circul, and then in the morning when you get up, you go to your phone, you end the study, and then it sends the report to the app, or it sends the data to the app, and the phone generates the report. Okay, and from your phone, then that's where you would share the data with your dentist. And obviously, if it's on the patient's phone, they get to see the data too. So that's how the data gets shared. I will also mention now that there's a portal available where you can remote track a large number of patients. So instead of getting these emails from each of your patients, you can automatically see the reports on a website. And there's an additional fee for that, and I only recommend that if you go at this wholeheartedly and you want to track a number of people. It's much easier to do that way. Okay. All right, so here's the report, and there's 3 types of reports. This is the sleep test. Okay. So you get 3 graphs here. There's oximetry, and you get the channels of the oximetry that you would expect to get from any oximeter. And you get an ODI. One of the cool things about this device is because it estimates wake, and I use the word estimate, I emphasize that, is it estimates wake. It's able to pull off the wake from the test time, and you get a little bit more accurate ODI. So the ODI from the Circle tends to be lower, it tends to be higher than your typical ODI. So just to be clear, because we're pulling off the wake, the test time is shorter, the numerator is smaller, and the ODI tends to be higher. So a lot of people said, "Oh man, it's so much more severe for my other oximeter," and that's why. So, and you get a range, you get the minutes and the percent at different ranges. The heart rate is great. Heart rate graphs, it's used for other things, but to look at a heart rate graph, there's some value to it. And then the thing that I get excited about is the sleep estimation, sleep stage estimation. And the reason that I get excited about this is because this is where you get a sense of how well you're sleeping. So remember that we're treating a sleep disorder. So we're trying to improve a person's sleep. And if something's interfering with their sleep, then we try to manage that interference and improve their sleep. So this graph kind of gives the end result of our goal, which is to improve a person's sleep. And it's easy for a patient to look at the sleep histogram and say, "Oh, I want to do better there." And I'm going to show you through in the next couple of slides how that is. So this is zooming in on the oximetry on 2 nights. This is me, and my ODI is 17. If on a typical oximeter, it's about 14, 13, 14, 15, and on this it's a little bit higher. And you can see, like, if it dips down below 90%, you get the little red tips there on the graph. I think the notable difference is the average SpO2 is lower on my baseline than on my treatment, and the graph just looks a little better. On the sleep histogram, that first night where baseline, look how fragmented that is. And I don't want to get too bogged down in, oh, is that accurate? It's okay, but if you use the same measuring device every time and you just use it to make an assessment of quality, it's perfect. Okay, it's a perfect graph, and you can see in treatment how consolidated that sleep graph is compared to the baseline. So this is kind of the thing that people get excited about, and why I think this is a great device. Here's me over 7 nights, and at this point you can kind of see some nights I do well and some nights I don't, and I have a story for each night. I can tell you, nights 1 to 3, I fell asleep wearing CPAP, woke up and say, "Oh, forget about this," took the mask off and finished the night without CPAP. And you can see on night 1 and 3 on my top graph there, the SpO2 graph, the floor fell out for me, and that's why. And the opposite happened on night 6. So on night 6, where you see the beginning of the night, I was challenged. I fell asleep without my CPAP on, and I said, "Oh man, oops," woke up and put my CPAP on and finished the night. So how this is applicable to you, because this is me wearing CPAP, because this is my mode of therapy, is if you're wearing an oral appliance and something similar happens, you can immediately get on this. And moreover, if you see a person's not wearing it, or they wear it for 2 hours every night, and then they finish the night without the appliance in, that tells you something. Okay, that's very important information. And if you were to ask the patient, "How you doing?" they say, "Yeah, I feel great and I wear it every night." Well, both those could be true. But if you're only wearing the appliance for 2 hours and taking it out, why? Okay, the patient may not even know why, or they may say, "Well, it's not that bad," to tell you that maybe I have muscle pain or have some discomfort, or whatever the case might be. And and when you have this objective data over a long period of time, you really can't, it's tough to lie your way out of that. And I don't mean to imply that patients lie, but sometimes it's hard to get at what's the problem, because, you know, we're talking about a sleep disorder, okay? And if you look at the graphs on the bottom, the histograms at the bottom, you can kind of see the better I sleep as far as the D sets are, the more consolidated my graphs are, which is the main point. There is, just in passing, I will tell you, there's the second report is an activity report. So on the app, how this works is you put the circle on your finger, and then you open up the app on your phone, and it says, what test do you want? And in the case of dentists, they're almost always going to pick sleep, and they'll ignore the other two tests. But just so you know, one of the tests is activity report. And so if you are going to help a patient manage their health or their weight, the Circle can be used for that purpose. The Circle is water resistant. It's not waterproof. So if they sweat a lot or whatever, that's fine. And you, instead of selecting sleep, you would select activity, and then it will track your activity. And this is actually me. Last time we talked about this, I did this exercise graph the day before, and I thought it was very cool. And this was my daughter's working with me on improving my health situation, and this was our workout, which was very cool. And I got excited about it, because you can say, oh yeah, look, I remember the workout. I remember when I almost passed out at the top there, and then I started feeling better. And you know, you can see and then you go, and then if you can make improvements here, then you can get people engaged in that. And then I will just mention, without any slide, that there is a daytime test. And the daytime test is, if you're wearing the Circle and you're in your office, it'll monitor their SpO2 real time. So if you have a need to monitor the person real time, they can absolutely do that. You can look at the phone, you can look at your phone or whatever, and say, okay, if I'm going to monitor your SpO2, I would do this procedure. That's fine. To be honest, the purpose of that is to do, in pulmonology, there's like the 7-minute walk test, or some exercise types of tests that are like 6 minutes, 7-minute tests, and they'll monitor your heart rate and SpO2 for those types of tests and give you a report on that. That's, you know, the general reason for that one. Okay, so let's talk about the primary objectives. Let's focus in on the clinical outcomes here. It's really cost effective. Okay, we'll talk about the price. You know, it's under $300, and there's a discount I'll talk about. So because of the price point, it makes available a couple of different models. And you know, the models are, because you know, it's less than $300. So you can have a patient buy one if the economic situation is such that your patient would be in that category, that you could add a $300 fee to whatever it is you're doing for your patient. But obviously that's not available for a lot of people. And so in the scenario where the economics aren't there, then you as a dentist can buy some number of these, or a couple of them, and hand them out to a patient, have them wear it for a couple of weeks, see how they're doing, and then when they bring it back, clean it up, sterilize it, and put it back in on another patient, put it out on another patient. So those are the two models that you have available as far as getting your patient kind of titrated or calibrated with their oral appliance, okay? So on number 2, it says confirm efficacy. And I want to make a distinction between compliance and efficacy. And I know most of us on this call understand that, but this is so important, because there is an efficacy chip available that you can embed in the acrylic of a lot of appliances, the Dentec. It's essentially a thermometer, and it can tell whether the patient's wearing the appliance or not. Very important. However, compliance is not as much a challenge in dentistry as efficacy. Is the appliance working? And to be honest with you, this is kind of some of the physician concern about oral appliances is, well, is it working? You know, I can look at a CPAP report and say that they wore it every night, and I can see the average flow output and the flow volumes, and see that the patient's doing well. what do you as a dentist have that can give me the same type of information over time? And as a dentist, we'll say, well, here's their oximetry for a night or 2 nights. And that's not the same. It's not equal. You know, it's good, but it's not equal. And the third is, if everyone's engaged in this, and we're now bringing in a new key stakeholder, and that's your patient. Okay, your patient now has been kind of a passive participant in the calibration process, and they'll tell you if they're uncomfortable or have anything that it's unexpected or what have you, and they're engaged, but that's not the same as getting them excited about improving, which is, I think, a great thing. And then finally, you know, my hope is that this proves out to be profitable. And you know, we're going to have to be pioneers in that area. Personally, I feel, and I'm not a dentist, so it's easy for me to take this position. It's such a good clinical procedure. It had the clinical yield is so great for the monetary output that that's a good enough reason to do it. And getting paid, if we can, you know, work it out to where we can get paid for monitoring this, then that's even better. That's like, you know, it just makes this even better. And I'm going to talk about that here, about the billing part in a second. Okay. All right. So at this point, I think
Jeff, I think you wanted to do the other poll question at this point.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I was pausing for, is I wanted to do the poll question.
There we go. So do you believe remote patient monitoring is a viable mechanism to determine therapeutic efficacy for oral appliance therapy? Yes or no? We'll let everybody jump on and answer that.
Yeah, yeah. And this is good. This is new stuff. I know this is a new concept, and I'm very interested in what the initial impressions are of the group.
So 86% yes,
Nice.
88% yes, and well, it's 90-10 now. It keeps jumping around.
Okay, that's great.
We're gonna close the poll.
Okay.
83% yes and 17% no. So
okay, so
83% see the value in using this as a remote patient monitoring experience. Yeah.
Okay, that is so good news. So let me tell you why that's good news. So based on what the poll indicates, you know, my claim that this is a great clinical procedure and the clinical yield is high enough, that's good enough reason to do this, okay? And 86 to 90% of you agree. Well, now I'm going to talk about the financial opportunity that, again, I just want to be very clear on this. This has to be proved out, but I've had 2 billing companies look at this, and they don't see any obvious reason why the answer would be no, you can't do this, okay? And the clinical, you know, and I'm going to talk about the details of that now. So I'm going to go through a number of slides fairly quickly. But what you're looking at now is the portal that I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to talk about, we're going to zoom in on remote patient monitoring. And you could take what I'm going to talk about now and forget about sleep apnea, talk about asthma, talk about COPD, talk about congestive heart failure, or any other medical condition of which OSA is one of the covered conditions. Okay, so we're going to talk about OSA and treating OSA with an oral appliance. Okay, so there's a portal available. There's a fee for it. It's not a lot, but you know, if you're interested in it, well, you know, I owe John a quote, and I'll put together a number, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. We make it pretty easy for you. So the kind of the technology here is that the Circle gets linked via the phone app to your portal. Okay, so you set up an agreement with your patient that you're going to share the data, and then when they do a Circle in the morning, they download the data. It automatically goes to your portal, and you don't need to do anything, nor does your patient. And then you can log into your portal and say, hey, look, Johnny wore the ring last night. Looks like he's doing pretty good. Or you can say, looks like Johnny hasn't worn his appliance in 3 nights. Let's give him a call. or whatever the case might be. Okay, so there's the therapy, there's the tracking of therapy, and then there's the kind of centralizing of the data to make it convenient, especially if you're going to track some number of patients. Okay. All right. So how the portal works is you log in and you'll see a list of your patients. This is my kind of personal, that's me, my wife, and my daughter, and you pick me. And then it pulls up all my info. And there is a bunch of sensors that we have, but we're talking about the Circle today. And this is what I'm focused on. Those other items I really don't have anything to do with. Okay, so then you pick you pick your patient, it gives you their info. And then there's the list of every test that they've done. And there's going to be pages of this. I have 2 or 3 pages. This is one page. And then you pick a page and it pulls up their data. Okay, so then you can go and look at several days in a row, or you can pull up the whole night and kind of say, wow, look at that. That was a pretty bad night, huh, Jeff? And I'd say, yeah, I started the night pretty good, and I took my CPAP off, and you can see what happened. Okay. And again, the same old story. It's hard to track sleep. It's not a simple thing. Okay, so I wanted to mention something about the FDA and the Circle and billing considerations. First things first. Last time we were on this webinar, I incorrectly said that the Circle was FDA cleared, and I was incorrect when I said that. And the Circle we've applied for FDA clearance. It is a consumer product, and we've also submitted the Circle to Medicare, and they've accepted it as a device. And so Medicare, if you're going to do remote patient monitoring on a Medicare patient, there's the code there for the device. So you would have to enter the device along with some of the other billing information to be able to provide the information. So you can bill. It's not FDA cleared. The FDA clearance is, kind of the COVID thing has put a kind of a delay on non-COVID related devices, although there is an app, and I won't get into it, but so that's where the FDA is. So what's the implication of the Circle not being FDA cleared? You can't diagnose anything with it, okay? It's not a medical instrument. And I'm not saying it's a medical instrument. I'm not touting it's a medical instrument. If your patient needs to be qualified for oxygen, you can't use the Circle. If you're, so it's not a diagnostic instrument. That's the implication. But because I'm not proposing that it be used as a diagnostic instrument, there's really no impact on it other than I will be very happy when it's FDA cleared. Okay? So it really doesn't have technically an impact on anything I've said today, but it'll be good when it's cleared. And we have applied for some really cool features, and one of the features that we'll be able to do once it is FDA cleared is if you're wearing the Circle and you can set an alarm, and let's say that your alarm is if you desat below 75%, you as a dentist get notified. And so that's part of what we have to prove that it works, and that'll be part of the FDA clearance, and that's why we don't have that feature yet, but it's not really applicable because if you're desatting really bad like that, maybe, we're not quite there yet. So anyway, getting back to the billing part. So let's look at the numbers. Okay, so there's 5 codes. There's really 4 codes. The last code has to do with the time of the appointment. So there's, I think, a 15-minute appointment and a 20-minute appointment, or 15 and 30 or something like that. But so the first code is giving the patient the device and showing them how to use it. So you would download the app to their phone, you'd show them how to pair, and then they're done. It's pretty simple. Then the next code is that if you own the sensor and you give it to the patient, that fee you have available, there you can bill for which is essentially rental of the fee, and that's not a small amount. These are per month amounts. Okay. Then there's the data collection. So this you would have to have the portal. Okay. So if you're bringing in the data and you're consulting the data and making clinical decisions on the data, there's a fee for that. Not bad, $58. That's pretty good. And then when you talk to your patient and you say, hey, listen, you need to come in, we need to adjust your appliance. That's an appointment based on a decision you've made by monitoring the patient at home. There's another fee for that. So for the first month, it's almost $200, and this is Medicare. So this is, you guys know about where Medicare falls on things. And then the subsequent months, you get approximately $175. It's $174 and some change from Medicare, because you only get to train the patient the first month. So after the subsequent months are you don't get to do the training, and there's no cap on the number of months. For this application, you guys know how long it takes to get somebody. Some people, it's one adjustment and it's done in a couple of weeks and that's it, and they're happy as a clam. Others, it could take a couple of months. So it just depends on it. But there is, as far as the cap on months, I haven't heard anybody mention anything about that. Okay. Who can bill for this? So when we talk about being able to bill for this, because remember, remote patient monitoring as a billable service is about 2 to 3 years old, and it's only just now being full bore last year as far as medical, physicians doing this. And with COVID, people have gone crazy. So one thing I will say at this point, telemedicine is a blanket term. This is a component of telemedicine. So telemedicine typically is a video conference for some type of an appointment, and there's some reimbursement for that. It's not that impressive, but there is, and there's a lot of convenience to it. But this is not, in of itself, this is not telemedicine. Okay, it's like making the difference between a sleep disorder and obstructive sleep apnea. Okay, it's obstructive sleep apnea is a subset of a sleep disorder, and it's the same thing. Telemedicine is a fairly broad term. Okay, but who can bill for remote patient monitoring? Okay, a physician and a qualified healthcare professional. So what is a qualified healthcare professional? That's a good question. Here's what the definition and the billing codes of a qualified healthcare professional is. A physician or other qualified person, and you guys can see that, who is qualified to do remote patient monitoring by their education and training or licensure, and you legally can do this. So you, in order to bill for remote patient monitoring, you have to be qualified to be able to deliver the appliance. If you're qualified to deliver an appliance, and I know there's some gaps in what I'm about to say, then you can be qualified to bill for remote patient monitoring. And there, as you all know, there's some wiggle room on who's qualified to deliver an appliance, okay? And there's the same wiggle room here. I think for most of us, we obtain the proper amount of training before we start, and then we gain our true expertise in doing. And at the end of the day, we get the ability to treat our patients. And if you follow that guidance, you can be successful at remote patient monitoring. Okay. All right. The patient education setup, here's the definition of that. They're very specific on the types of information that can be used. Again, we're managing sleep apnea. So they put a list of channels for all the conditions, not just sleep apnea, but you can see pulse oximetries in there, and that's what we're talking about. Okay. Here's what's involved with the setup and training of the patient. You can see this, you can build this once, and the patient has to have the device at their home available for a minimum of 16 days. And I think Barry asked me a pretty funny question. It was a good question, but he asked, well, how did they come up with 16 days? And the answer is it's fairly random, other than it's more than half of the month. So they figure, well, if you have a unit for at least half the month, or more, just over half the month, then you're good. All right. So this is essentially kind of a rental fee. So as long as the patient has it for the month, then and it's transmitting data to you, then you can bill for it. So again, the billing for remote patient monitoring requires a portal, because part of the requirement here is that you need to be receiving data for the month. Okay, that's not a bad amount, $64. That's not bad. Here's the definition of that. This is the Medicare rate. It's 30. You can bill it once every 30 days. And it has to be in their possession for 16 days out of that 30 days. Okay. So I guess where that would mean, if you give them the sensor like on the 20th, you couldn't bill for that month. You'd have to wait for the next month before you could bill for the full month. So maybe that's what the thing is. So I'm just thinking out loud. Okay, so that's that one. Treatment management. So again, this is you're receiving data on a daily basis. And you're looking at this data and getting a sense of what how the patient's responding to therapy. And this is the code for the 20-minute appointment. And okay, so on this code here, this is the same. This is the same code. And this has to do with a Medicare non-facility and a facility rate. So are you a person or a hospital? Okay. And if you're a person, you get $51. And if you're a hospital, you get $32. So that is an important distinction. You guys are people, so you'll be able to bill at the $51.54 rate. Okay. Again, let's see. It looks like this is a duplicate slide. Okay, now once you have done your data collection, oximetry in this case, there is using your expertise to decide what to do next. And once a month you can bill 99091, and this is in lieu of an appointment. Okay, so the codes I just talked to you about were appointments. This is a code that says you looked at the to me, this looks like a little bit better code, but at the end of the day, it's going to be what you can bill your payer for. So your payer may say, we don't accept the previous code. We only accept 99091. In such case, this would be the amount that you could bill, but you can't do both. Okay. And this is the definition of it. This is the 30 minutes. I think is a 30-minute session by a physician or qualified healthcare professional, and you can only do this once a month. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna this is a picture of the portal. I think I've already showed you guys how that works. These are the same slides at the end. So I'm wrapping up here. Okay. So I am wrapping up. This is the last couple slides here. So the Circle, it's $299. When you're ordering, there's two sizes. So what's not really obvious is that the Circle is expandable. So there's only two sizes. There's a small and a large. So the small is ring size 5 to 9.5, I believe it is. And that's the small size. That's like around 100 pounds, give or take, on average. And then if you're above that, then your ring size is from 6 or 9.5 to 12, and that's the large size, or the larger size. And the reason it can fit a range of ring sizes is it's spring-loaded. So when you put it on your finger, the edges can expand out. So it's pretty cool, and it's one of the things that makes it comfortable is it puts just enough tension on the finger to keep it in place and get a good reading. Okay, so there's a little bit of a spring on it, so it does clamp down. It keeps it kind of in place, but it's not tight. So when you wear it, you'll say, okay, that's how you can wear this 8 hours a day, for a month, and it won't bother you because it's extraordinarily comfortable. So you would order the appropriate size or sizes, and then when you're ordering, and I'll show you the link in a second. Type in the word dental. Okay, so in the checkout box, there's a coupon code. And you guys know, anybody that's ordered anything online, there's almost always a coupon code in the shopping cart. If you type in the word dental, we'll pull $29 off the order. So it's a 10% discount. It's almost $30 off the order. So, if you're ordering a couple of them, that's, $30 a pop. That's not bad. That's just kind of putting a fine point on the coupon code bit there. Okay, so you get your Circles, right? It'll arrive in the mail, so you order it online, and when it arrives, you install the app. You just go to Circle on the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, depending if you're iOS or Android, and it works on both. And then you click a button that says Add Circle, and you put the Circle on. And when you put it on, it kind of turns the Circle on, and then you're good to go. Okay, so that's pretty simple. So I'm wrapping up. At this point, I wanted to share my info. There's the web address where you can order it. The bottom one is the actual address, and I think what I'll do is I'll give John a little PDF, and in that PDF, if you guys are interested and you're in the United States, again, I'm the rep in the United States. There's another rep for Canada. And by the way, the Circle is available in Canada. I don't know if they're quite selling it yet, but it's like the kit. It's really close. So they're probably on a similar path. But if you're in the US, click the link that you see there, or in the form, or in the little marketing piece that I'll give to John, and order yourself one up. Give me a call. Love to hear from you. There's my phone number there. There's my email address, and my battery's running low. So yeah, I'm pretty much, that's what I wanted to talk about.
Great, Jeff. Listen, a little bit of housekeeping. It's now 5:05. Great information. I didn't want to stop you, even though we reached the 5 o'clock mark. But for those of you that have commitments and you have to leave, don't worry. When you check out, just answer the questions at the end, and you will still qualify for the CE credits. For those of you that can stick around, Jeff is going to be answering some questions. I'd like to start off with just making a couple comments. Jeff alluded to the fact that there's a Canadian distributor and a US distributor, Jeff being the US distributor. So of course the pricing that Jeff was talking about is US pricing. The Canadian pricing is $450 Canadian dollars. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a email out to everybody that's on that will have information for both the Canadian site to order and the US site to order, and an appropriate coupon code for both. So if any of you are interested in having, trying one out or two out, what I don't know is exactly when the Circle, I'm waiting for one. I'm going to be receiving one to try out. I'm excited to try it out. And I don't know when it's going to come, and I don't know when it's going to be available. But just as I understand, it's very close. So we can go to some questions now.
Thank you. From Dr. Alice Charlin Basford. She would like to know how, she's an MD, and she would like to know where she can get the antibody tests. She wants to offer it to patients and staff. Is it possible to bulk order, discount, or direct order?
Now, is this a physician in the US or in Canada? Because once again, I think it would be two different sites. Jeff, you may need to shut down your video camera and start it up again, because it looks like you're frozen. But I know that there's a Canadian site for your order in Canada, and I'm pretty sure that Jeff would have a site to order it in the US. So once again, I can include that information in the emails that I sent out to everybody.
She's a DMD and an MD, and she's in the US.
In the US, okay. So I'll make sure to get that information from both Jeff and from the Canadian distributor and send it out in an email.
Thank you, Dr. Challen. You will be getting that information. Thank you. The next question is from Robert Brigida. How well does it work with children? I'm assuming this is the Circle.
Right. So Jeff, are you with us still? You need to turn off your video cam and turn it back on because you're frozen. Let me see if I can do anything here. There, Jeff? Are you with us? Jeff, can you hear?
You can hear he's muted.
Oh, it doesn't say he's muted here on my screen.
Well, he's talking and we can't hear him.
Yeah, I know. Well,
Frozen.
yeah.
So,
There we go. Jeffrey, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys okay. Can you hear me?
Now we can. Okay.
Okay,
So,
yeah, I had to reset that. So the question about children,
right.
and the easier way to handle this is the weight. So the device, the Circle goes down to about 100 pounds, a little lower, if you and a little higher. But if you're below, if you're below, let's say 90 pounds, probably not a good option.
So basically between 90 and 100 pounds would be the small device, and then the larger device would be anyone over 100 pounds.
Yes. Yep.
I think the real key, Jeff, is that, and I think the basis of the question not only is the size, but when we talk about HSTs, we know that they are not validated for children. And that's because of the algorithms are much more complicated, but oximetry by itself is valid. So when we're looking at simply ODI, we can get that on a child the same way we get it on an adult.
Yeah.
And we don't have any more questions, Dr. V, in the chat.
Okay. Barry, Don, jump on. Do you have any questions or any thoughts?
1 second.
Jeff, what I would love to see you try to do for Medicare, I am a DME. So when you're talking to those folks, I would love to see this available for dentists that function as DMEs for oral appliances to make it a billable thing as part of the service specifically.
I think I do have a dentist that's collecting some data and going to bill Medicare. From what I can tell, I think Medicare is going to be probably easier to deal with than private payers in this particular area, because Medicare really is pushing remote patient monitoring. It's kind of a Medicare program. They're driving it. The patients that are monitored remotely have a dramatically less incidence of events, hospital events and admissions. So they really feel that remote patient monitoring is a cost-effective way to manage a chronic condition, because it has the benefit of reducing admissions to the hospital. So, I think, that's good news. It has to be proven out, like I've said before today. But unlike in other areas of Medicare, I think in this area, because this program is being driven by Medicare, we might find less resistance and a little easier in the billing process.
Sorry, Jeff, I do have a question about the Circle, and I can't remember if this was addressed last time when Dr. Chin was talking about it a little bit when she touched upon. How do you clean it? How do you disinfect it?
Well, I think in January I would have had one answer, which is probably just take an alcohol prep pad or spray it with some Cavicide, and then let it dry, because it is resistant to moisture. I mean, I wouldn't go swimming with it or take a shower with it. I think somebody asked about that. It might survive that, it might not, but I certainly cleaning and disinfecting, whatever you're going to do to that on other types of testing equipment. So if you have an HST or an oximeter or any of those types of instruments, whatever you're going to do kind of post COVID-19 for those instruments, you can do with the Circle, as it's a fairly robust device. I mean, it's made of brushed stainless steel.
So you just follow the protocols of the disinfectants that we're already using.
Correct. Yeah. It's very tough. It's made of brushed stainless steel, so it's a I don't know if you could tell from the pictures, but it's a steel device.
Actually, one question just came in. Just a sec. A couple of questions just came in. Does sorry, this is from Lawrence Jones. Does a small teenager in around around 100 pounds using the Circle problematic?
That's a tough question. I would say if you have a Circle, I would definitely give it a shot. And what you might end up finding is that there's a finger that it works best on. So, it's tough because, it might work on 100-pound person and not another. But if you have one and you have a patient that's slight or a kid that's young and is kind of right on that threshold, when you're looking at their hands, see if there's a large finger or see if there's a finger that you think, might work better. And then, give the instruction, be sure that you wear it each night on this particular finger. I find that I've worn the Circle on 2 or 3 fingers. I obviously use a large, and it really doesn't matter. I mean, I haven't seen different results on different fingers, but in that case, what will happen is if, let's say that it's too large and the patient's too small, whatever, what you'll get is a lot of gaps in the data. You'll see a lot of kind of where data is kind of out of range, where we're not getting a signal. And, that's essentially movement artifacts. And if you see a lot of that, either pick a different finger or just use a traditional oximeter and get what you can.
So there's no cropping or anything available to us to take out bad segments of data or anything like that?
No.
So I have a question. I have a question, but I have a question for Don and John, and Jeff's not allowed to answer. So let's assume Jeff isn't here and we've just listened to this presentation, and you and the 3 of us are, as we will be anyway, on a text message to discuss the presentation. And rather than do it privately, let's do it publicly. Let me ask you what your thoughts are, Don, in terms of this potential, and John, this potential as you see it. For your patient care, what you see as a possible advantage, and then what you see as a possible, that may be possibly concerning. Don, you go first.
I think the device looks amazing. I don't see anything wrong with it except the logistics. Somebody losing it because it's small, the pain in the ass stuff would just be little things. But it looks like a no-brainer. It's not that expensive. It gives you the data. I think in time, Jeff, like we talked last time, you'll be able to expand this to RDI. I'd be really curious to see what you're asking for in the 510K. I would love to see what you are asking for in the 510K.
Jeff, I also have an appliance in for FDA approval, and I will tell you that while we thought that it would be possible during this time period, it would be quick because all these agents were working at home. All these agents are home, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're working. And Don, any concerns?
John, me?
No, Don, do you have any concerns?
Just the logistics. Like I say, a small device that a patient's going to lose, the billing. But as far as a monitoring device, I think it looks amazing.
John.
So obviously I love the size for convenience, and I love the fact that I can leave it with them so they're not going back and forth. I calibrate all my appliances using an HST. Most of the time it's the Knox T3. I have a couple of others that I go to also. So, that's pretty cumbersome. And sometimes you get patients where you're doing 2, 3, 4 studies, the difficult cases, before you actually end up settling, because you're dealing with supine stuff you're trying to beat, and also. So what we have here is a device they can just take home with them, right from when I basically deliver the appliance, have them home calibrate more often than I do now, right? And I can follow them, and this should hopefully minimize the number of visits and get them to that endpoint that much quicker. The thing that's missing is position, but I really think there's a possibility here of pairing this with a little positional, device that can be put on the forehead to, communicate by Bluetooth, and that would complete the picture, because then we'd have oximetry and position, available. So, but that's future development possibility. As far as losing the device goes, I absolutely understand Don's concern. However, right now I'm giving him a device. Handing out a device that costs around $5,000 Canadian, when I'm giving them an HST, and thankfully I always get them back. But this is, I feel much better giving a device out that's less than, well, approximately $300, whatever it's going to be Canadian or US, right? I feel much better handing that out as a lender. So that's so far. I mean, I haven't tried it yet. I'm looking forward. I'm waiting for mine. Much more to say about it once I actually, have an opportunity to try it out, like Jeff has done, and going forward from there.
All right, so I'm as I look at this, and those who know me know that I'm not easy. I'm always looking at the realities as much as possible. If I were still practicing, and in essence I am through several programs and working with Don, I think that this has the potential to be one of the most exciting things that's happened in sleep medicine, for the reason that it conquers our greatest concern when we do HSTs, and that is night-to-night variability, and that we're really looking at a lengthy period of time that's gone. I'm less concerned about the posture, because the reality is all of our patients have been diagnosed. And so certainly, if we already know that the patient has a postural related sleep apnea, we will deal with that and relate, etc., and then proceed. And if they don't have posturally related sleep apnea, which many of them don't, that's no longer a concern. My only concern, and Jeff, I need you to think about this. Whenever we do something new in dentistry, or we want to test it, we'll go ahead and put in bill a couple patients, to find out what the recovery is going to be through Medicare, and then they give us back their summary, and then we don't and then we cancel the bill, the state, so that we don't actually charge them that, and then we have an idea of what they're going to cover, and that's great. My concern is that they haven't accepted any prescription from any dentist for any monitoring. It's up to this point, it's had to be the physician that ordered, and they got paid for the reading of the tests. So I'm concerned. I wouldn't want anyone to start billing and getting paid by Medicare, and then finding out that they're paying Medicare back, that they've been checked. So I would proceed with caution, but at the same time, if in fact that can happen, I think this is already a no-brainer. Then this becomes a profitable no-brainer. So I wish you luck with the reimbursement. I'm just not sure about the qualified practitioner allowing dentists to prescribe a testing unit.
I know I'm not supposed to talk, but just to let you know, the person that I have collecting data, I had her ask the physician that wrote the prescription for the oral appliance, the diagnostic physician, to order remote patient monitoring on the same prescription. So we do have, if this turns out to be a viable path for reimbursement, then one of the things I'm going to say is, whoever writes the prescription for the oral appliance asks that same physician to put in, please remote patient, monitor this patient remotely for efficacy.
Just so we know, if a physician writes for a remote and asks me to go ahead and distribute an HST, I can do that, but I still can't submit for payment for it.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, we'll have to see. That might be true here too. I don't know yet. We haven't gone through that.
I want to be careful. I don't want you, and you and I don't want anybody in trouble in that regard. But frankly, the economics. If you're just giving it to somebody for a couple of weeks and then getting it back, now you don't even have to charge the $300. You could charge, you know, a monthly fee of $50, which is so far less than what they were paying for a one-night test with an HST. And in the long run, everybody wins. If you charge $50 a month for monitoring, in the long run, everybody wins.
Yeah, you're absolutely
Barry,
right.
I think we're going to have different definitions here, though. It depends on what the 510K shows. You know, if this is classified as an HST, that's one thing. But I don't think it's going to be classified as an HST. So if it is just remote patient monitoring as a DME, we should be okay. I mean, it looks good. Let's put it that way.
I think the key on that point is that it's not a diagnostic. It's not in the realm of diagnostic. So there might be a difference between the billing of an HST, which is a diagnostic procedure, and remote patient monitoring. But again, this is speculation, and as soon as I have real world experience, I'll be happy to share it.
I would jump on this. This looks, Jeffrey, of all the things you've done, and and I was excited about your bruxism about the EMPs and still am about that's potential in the NOx3. But of all the things, this to me, literally makes the most sense. I wish you the best.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot, actually. Sincerely.
Roger Raval, sorry,
Go ahead,
can we
go
go
ahead.
ahead? There's a question
Yeah.
that came.
Yeah. Go ahead, Elaine. Yeah.
Roger Raval, I have been told that as dentists, we can bill Medicare as an appointments. The appliance becomes a dental issue after 90 days, and Medicare doesn't cover dentistry. So how can we bill this remote monitor? I think that you answered that question partially.
Could you ask that question again? I'm sorry, that you're going in and out.
I have been told that as dentists, we can't bill Medicare as in appointments. The appliance magically becomes a dental issue after 90 days, and Medicare does not cover dentistry. So how can we build this remote monitoring? This is from Roger Raval.
Yeah. I'll take the first pass at that one. The remote patient monitoring codes is, and the devil's in the details here, is there are, I alluded to it in my discussion in that there's 3 codes associated with appointments. 2 of them are appointments and 1 of them is for a service. So so it could be that the billing for the appointment times, I think it was 20 minutes and 30 minutes, that would not be available to a dentist. But then there was the 99091, which was making a clinical decision based on monitoring and not an appointment code. That might be where one of those codes is the difference. And then the other thing I'll just add is that this is a new category of billing. So there's durable medical billing, there's diagnostic billing, and then separately there's remote patient monitoring. So it is a new category. So we can take what we know about the first 2 categories and extrapolate or predict what we expect on the new category of remote patient monitoring. But to be honest, I think once we get some real world experience on this, that'll be, at the end of the day, the best to go on.
Fair enough. Thank you. Now, he's also asking, the app is free, but is there any ongoing charges to monitor via the site?
No.
Well, the
No,
portal.
okay, I'm sorry. Let me clarify that. If you don't subscribe to the portal, the answer is no. If you subscribe to the portal has a setup fee, but if you smile, we waive the setup fee. And then there's a small per patient per month fee. And when I say small, it's depending on the number of patients, it ranges from $3 a month per patient, or excuse me, $4 a month per patient if you have I think it's 10 or 20. And if you have one or two, then I think it's $8 a patient per month on the portal. So on that, the answer is yes. And the reason that you would do the portal is you intend on billing for insurance, and then the reimbursement from that would justify the expense of the portal.
So Jeff, let me just get some clarification on that. So if you're talking about per month per patient or per circle. So if you've got a circle that you're lending out to patients, now you have the portal, the circles on the portal. When you get it back, you're paying that $8. Let's assume it's the $8 version. You're paying the $8 for the access through the portal to that circle. And then the next month you have it, you're giving it to another patient, right? So it's not per patient, it's per circle that you're paying the $8 for. Because you're going to be always registering it to a different. Is that those details get sorted out yet?
Yeah. You explained it better than I did.
Okay, so the fee is if you employ 5 of these circles in your practice and you want to sign up for the remote monitoring, it's going to be a few bucks a circle. So it's 5 times 5 or 5 times 6 or 5 times whatever the number is going to be, and then that's a monthly fee. But you have these circles are going in and out all the time. Sometimes to 2 different patients in 1 month, or other times one patient might have it for 2 months. And then at the end of the day, you're basically recovering the circle and giving it to another patient. But your cost for the remote monitoring through the portal is basically the number of circles you have times whatever the fee is going to be per circle once you guys sort that out. Correct?
Yep.
Okay.
The next question is, why does the portal cost so much? That's from Lawrence Jones.
Well, I'm not sure that. So I'll answer the question. I'll just I don't know, be a little candid. The portal cost, and this goes for almost anything that a person sells. They're going to base the price on what they think the value is and what it brings to the customer and what they believe the customer will get. So if you're able to bill and receive $170 a month, then a person that's launching this product has to set a price point, and they'll say, okay, I think I can get away with $8 per month per circle. And it's so that's kind of how we come up with pricing on that. And I will tell you that if there was a slide where I had there was a drop down and we selected the circle as the sensor, but there was a long list, and so the circle is by far the simplest product that we have on that list. I believe there is an oximeter on there, but it's a traditional oximeter, not the circle. And then there's 4 or 5 other products, all of which are like blood pressure cuffs, glucose monitoring, and some of these other more complex. And that same portal can be used for those. So this is not the only market that the portal is designed for. So there's other markets that have different considerations, and to be honest, are more complex. And it might be perceived, because we're not using all the capabilities on this particular application of the portal, you don't seem to be getting a lot of value, but there is a lot there. And so I feel that $8 a month per patient is probably a fair price.
Thank you. The last one is from John Buses. I can't speak to anything else yet, but I've got one on my finger now, and I can say they are not going to be lost at night.
Yeah.
How do you get one?
Yeah, I think what John's referencing there is that they are spring loaded, so it's not tight to where you're uncomfortable or it would cut off circulation, but it's secure. And the thing that's cool about it is that you have a sense that it's not going to come off, and that's one of the nice things about the product, and it's one of the things you really can't experience until you wear one for yourself. And I know exactly what he means, because I'm very confident.
It's also solves one of our biggest issues even with HSTs. The most common mistake that's made on patients with HSTs when they're setting them up is if they're using tape, they get too tight on their fingers, and that's then uncomfortable. And if it's not tight enough, we lose the signal. So if this is consistently tight enough for a signal and yet consistently comfortable, that's a big plus for any oximeter.
Yeah.
The other thing too, Jeff, is that because I didn't know this until today's talk, that it actually extracts out through some type of algorithm the day, what it interprets as being awake time. So it's not really the recording time oximetry we get with an HST, which of course is going to be different than what we get from a sleep time with a PSG. This will be closer to the PSG experience. I'm not saying the same, but closer, right? Because that's going to be one of the main differences that we see between HST and PSG.
Yeah, the
recording time and sleep time.
Yeah, the challenge is always when you base an index on test time and you're awake. If you're awake for 4 hours in a 9-hour test, you can have a very diluted ODI.
Right.
So it mitigates that to some extent, and then the argument, playing devil's advocate, is, well, does it underscore or overscore wake? And I can tell you it underscores wake. So it's better, and I like it because it does that, but I would never say it's akin to a PSG as far as ODI goes.
And the last comment from John Boozies is that it's like a ring that has been custom sized to a perfect fit. Great.
All sorts of positive feedback, Jeff.
Yeah.
You got to be loving this. Hey, this is a tough crowd. This is a tough crowd. We're not up here. We don't come on here to sell stuff. You know that, right? No. So this is you're going to sleep well tonight.
Yeah, believe me, I'll have a good weekend. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
So that's it for questions? Yeah, it's 5:36.
Any last minute comments or
any last? Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeff. That was great.
Oh.
Really enjoyed it. I learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to getting my own to trial. I'll be sending emails out to everybody with the information so they know where to order it, discount code, and so forth. And we're all learning together.
Oh,
that's great.
Wait. Sorry. There's one question here that was overlooked. Rear arrest in chronic pain patients are not uncommon. Can Circle help? Thank you,
absolutely.
Lord.
Absolutely. That is a great question. I'm glad you held up the end for that.
Yeah.
It's a great question, and the answer is yes. It is a fantastic, because if you're trying different various modalities on managing pain, and how effective is this while they sleep, which is a critical component to managing pain, it absolutely can, you can dial in a therapeutic intervention for pain management in a unique way.
Good. Great. Well, on that note, unless Don or Barry has to add anything, we're good.
On that last note, it'd be a great way to screen too for if there's a sleep issue in a pain patient. So that was one of the other things I would.
Excellent. Yeah. All good. Okay. Well, thanks, Jeff, once again. Thanks all for being on here, and see you at a future By Corona webinar. Stay tuned for dates, topics, and times. Okay.
Yeah.
Ciao,
Thanks,
everyone.
John. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Great weekend.